What's up, everybody? Welcome to In Great Company. I have a really great friend here, a great company. I'm excited to introduce him. This is a brother, a friend. He's marrying one of my closest friends, and someone that I admire for his story, his life, even the way that you deal with people. I think it's just very encouraging. So welcome to In Great Company. I'll allow you to introduce yourself. We're going to have a good time. And so introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm honored to be here. But yeah, I think everything you said. Well, I mean, I feel honored to hear everything you said. But
A brother, a friend.
you're my sister, you're
Absolutely.
my friend, someone that impacted my relationship with your best friend that you said.
Yeah.
It's like one of the main important people that helped us.
I didn't do that much.
Jumpstart
I
things.
actually got in
Yeah,
trouble.
you
know,
might
I got
say
in
that.
trouble in the beginning, right? When I met you.
I didn't even
She
know
was.
that.
I think she expected me to be like to grill you or to be mean to you, and she was like, I was
Yeah.
like, he's
Oh,
great.
yeah, I remember
and
that,
She's
I
like,
remember that.
ma'am, and I was like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. He's great.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
even then,
Yeah.
when I found out that you said that about me, it was something I knew was like a proof of like how great of a person you are and how far we were gonna go in life. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean a little bit about myself.
Your name?
My full name is Shishay, but everybody knows me as Shish, and that is partly a representation of my personality and who I am, and just how I engage with people. It's like Shish,
Yeah.
it's catchy, it's easy flowing.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I came to I guess some important things about my life is that I came to the U.S. about 10, 11 years ago.
Okay.
Born in Ethiopia and then raised in Eritrea.
Yeah.
And then made my way to the U.S. at the age of 17.
Grew up in Cali.
Yeah, and then grew up in Oakland, California.
A true
510.
Oakland Bay Area dude.
That's home. That's home.
Yeah.
And I spent there about 11 years. And I recently moved to the DMV, partly in pursuit of better career.
No.
Mainly
Number
because
one
of my
priority.
wife.
Yes.
or my wife to be.
Yes, in about 2 months.
Yeah,
3
about
months.
2 months.
Yeah.
So 2 months and 2 weeks.
That's awesome.
Crazy to say. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so that's a little bit about myself.
Well, we're glad to have you, Sheesh. There's a couple things I'll speak on. I think recently I had a conversation. So my Sheesh, when you're hanging out with my parents, and I think it goes to speak on your personality and your upbringing, which we'll touch a little bit on. But I remember my mom had come and she had made coffee and you came and sat down with them, and the way you talked to them and like just made them feel like they were important. And I don't just even the way that is not only how you deal with like people your age or like even kids, it's the way that you even deal with adults speaks to like this I guess multi-generational like strengths that you have. And even like the other day I was like talking to her and she's like, how is he doing? I was like, he's doing great, he's fine. But it just goes to show that you really leave an impression not only with people that are your peers or like maybe you can, because you're not going to get much from my parents, there's no like friendship that's being built, but you are still leaving an impression with even adults that that you sit down with just for coffee. So
yeah, I mean,
and it's intentionality, I think.
It is. I think it's, first of all, it's amazing to hear that. And sometimes when I'm always engaging with people, the intention is always, okay, how can I make this first person feel a little bit better about themselves and feel loved by someone else or feel honored or important by someone else? Because that's always been my mindset in how I perceive my relationship or my engagement with people.
Yeah.
And that's also partly because of being the youngest in the house out of four siblings, and my background plays a significant role because being the youngest a lot of times in the environment that I grew up in, unless you have a sort of personality that kind of brings you out and puts you in front of people, you can easily be forgotten or not be thought of in a sense, right? So I think it's mainly that, but that kind of, helped me engage in people in such a way that, I hope that helps them feel important. So
for sure. Okay, so I know we're going to touch a little bit on all of that, but let's roll it back. We always want to start with the beginning. And one of the things that I've always said on the podcast, and I think it's always important to start with the beginning. And I think your beginning is very different from a lot of people's. And some of us grew up, I was born in Ethiopia, but I didn't grow up in Ethiopia. And I think it just shows that. So, okay. beginning. So born in Ethiopia and then moved to Eritrea, what age?
So I moved to Eritrea 4.5.
Okay, four and a half. And then grew up there.
Yeah.
So take me to
Through that process?
young,
Yeah.
and not even the move, but like what that was like growing up, and definitely touch on that upbringing and like coming into yourself and understanding what that looks like, and then also touch a little bit on. So I believe you accepted the Lord when you were in Eritrea.
Yeah.
So touch a little bit on that and just walk us through what that 4-year-old.
Sheesh, what he remembers.
Wait, how old were you when you left?
When I left Eritrea, 17. Well, 16 going to 17.
All right, let's go with the younger Shish and let's talk about it.
So, I mean, there's a funny story.
Okay.
Not funny story, but a funny comment that was made by my friend, really good friend of mine before. And he said, no one can brag that they've been deported from one African country to another. And it's not part of... And it's not part of a lot of people's story to say, I've been deported, but
their
not
parents
like...
may have, or they know the story, but they actually were a part of it.
Yeah, it's a...
And then be here to tell the story.
Exactly.
Now.
So it's quite a special thing to say that I've been deported from one
Do you
African
remember
country
that time?
to another. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the human aspect in that sense where the fragments of things that we can be able to remember at such a young age have to play a very significant role or has to be and somehow very traumatic.
Right.
That's what I think. Right. So there are fragments of things that I always remember and that I will never forget that took place at that age, when I was like 3-4 years old, which is hard to explain why and how, but there are very vivid memories that I can never forget.
They were specific, maybe.
Yeah. And it's also just how pivotal they were to lead my life in a certain way or change my life in such a dramatic way. But to provide that backstory is my mom and dad moved to Ethiopia at a very young age. My mom was 4 and my dad was, I think, about 15, 16 years old. Yeah. And that move happened because of the war that was taking place between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Between a little bit of history from 61 to 91, which is a 30-year war that took place. So in those time, things were very difficult in Eritrea. So because of those reasons, my mom and dad moved. My mom at 4 years old, which is ironically the same age that I moved back to Eritrea. And then my dad was about 16. My mom and dad met and through, I think, family arranged marriage process, and they got married in the mid 80s, 85, 86, I believe. And we were a growing family. My dad was a very successful businessman, especially in Addis. The moment he got there, he was hardworking. He was very business minded and very disciplined in a lot of things that he did for his life. So that carried on to him kind of growing a lifestyle that was considered very successful back then. He was able to buy some properties. He had some business properties as well. So we were, I guess in a very standard explanation, a very happy, growing family in Ethiopia. And we, family of mom and dad with siblings of 4. I'm the youngest of 4. I have a brother and I have 2 brothers and a sister. So that was pretty much our family background when we were in Ethiopia. But then around 97, another war broke off between Eritrea and Ethiopia, which was border-based war at that time. And then they announced that they were going to deport Eritreans from Ethiopia and then Ethiopians from Eritrea. So both governments participated in this process, which is unfortunate. And I remember very vividly when this announcement was made on ETV, where I remember this. Medles Zenawi
at 4 years old, sir.
Trust me, it's so.
But I mean, it's
low-key
trauma.
Very,
so it's very specific.
You can never. There's some things you can never forget. And I remember him on an interview saying, or justifying the cause for the deportation to be anything. We can do whatever we want. We can even deport them because we don't like the color of their eyes. That quote has never left my mind. And we watched this on TV, feeling shocked, feeling distressed, feeling scared, feeling
Do you remember
fearful.
If there was a lead up to this, or was it like because the way my mother tells the story, it feels like a sudden thing.
Yeah,
the
I mean, for
deportation
us,
part?
it wasn't sudden because I
kind of were
think
paying
our
attention.
community is a lot smaller.
Okay.
And if it's a very, not in a negative way, but it's a very proud, we're very proud
Yes,
people.
yes.
Like proud of our identity, of the struggle we went through, and how we gained our independence, and all these things kind of, represent the type of feeling we have towards our nationality and
Yes.
our background. Could be positive, could be negative at times, but at least that's how we were as people. So we kept a close eye on how things were brewing, how things were developing. Did I knew every little detail at that time? No, I was a little, but that dramatic moment is what I remember. I'm sure for my parents and my siblings, they were probably aware of the steps that led up to that point.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, for us, it was shocking, but the buildup wasn't like sudden. Like there was things that were brewing, and then after that interview, things just started falling down piece by piece.
Yeah.
It started in '98 when the military came in the middle of the night and took my dad with his pajamas.
Yes.
And deported him because the first phase of the deportation was getting rid of the fathers.
Yes, the men.
And the men of the house. And that is partly because of, I'm sure it was a strategic move, because when you dismantle, not in a very patriarchal belief, but I'm just saying generally that the strategy was if you remove the men, then you can, stop the family from moving around or
from growing, providing, all of that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my dad got deported a year before us in '98, and then my whole family, with myself included, got deported in '99, which is about a year after my dad. Okay. So that's how that process took place. Being born, the family background, and then how it led up to the deportation.
And you get to Eritrea. You guys already had family there?
I mean, yeah, most of our family was in Eritrea at that time. We also had a lot of family members in Ethiopia as well, but it wasn't like we went to Asmara and then it was just us.
Yeah.
No, most of our family was living there. Okay. So, but it was something that we had to adjust.
Yes.
I mean, I remember the whole process, from the point where we got taken away from our home, we were like loaded in trucks and then was sent through the borders. And then there was moments that we were hiding in, like military hangars and not making a noise and not turning on lights in the middle of the night because it was a war zone and they could accidentally throw missiles towards us. So these things...
And as a kid, regardless how young you are, of course you're gonna remember that. That's trauma, and that's all of your senses and things being alert.
To be honest, when we were going through that, it was scary, but it was somehow we kind of saw the humor in it as we were kids. So whenever I think back to those memories, I don't feel like this heaviness in a sense. I mean, it's very sad to go through that at such a young age, but somehow, someway, we found the humor in that process. So some of the memories we think of are more funny than, sad or traumatic. Yeah. But I guess that's the coping mechanism we did at that time. So.
For sure. Okay. So, and I think not everybody has that story, right? Like not everybody, I mean, people have their own journey and their own traumas or their own, specific parts of their story, but not everybody has that specific story. So that's what makes it different. But so you get to Eritrea, you guys settle as a family, and then walk me through life in Eritrea, school, like, I mean, even like, and I knew for sure we always touch on the faith part, but just I want to understand that sheesh.
Yeah, I mean, the transition wasn't the same for everybody that went through that. Like every household have had their own struggles and issues, and even
because of support, or
it's many reasons. Some people fell into depression because they lost everything.
Gotcha.
Some families recovered picked up and continued in a sense. I mean, my parents did well enough to kind of pick up and go, but for very multiple reasons, which I don't really understand the actual details.
Yes.
My mom and dad separated a year after we moved
Okay.
after we got deported to Eritrea and we
Okay.
moved there. And that kind of like started the deportation started the downfall of my family, but
Yeah.
that continued when we moved to
Yeah.
Eritrea because
Yeah.
my mom and dad separated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like family chaos that took place
Yeah.
from there. And, and it was trying to get a grip of life
Yeah.
as things were dramatically changing,
Yeah.
From a household
They
that
already had established
had
ways
very,
of living.
yeah,
and
exactly.
providing for themselves and even careers
Very
and
stable,
everything. Yeah.
very normal,
Mm-hmm.
nothing crazy or nothing bad. Very standard lifestyle
Households, yeah.
to a very dramatic, extreme change.
Yeah. Divorce alone will change a household, let alone deportation and divorce
Yeah.
at the same time. So I
And
can
also
imagine.
like going, it's both good and bad going through that at such a young age if you're like 5 or 4 years old. It can be both extremely challenging in how you perceive life, or it could also shape you in a certain way because that's all you've known. Because if you think about what we just talked about, I've known less of the time we spent as a family together than a family separated.
Right.
So
That's your norm.
like, that's all I've known kind of growing up. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that kind of came out of that, the family, like separation and things that unfolded afterwards.
Yeah.
And sometimes divorces can be messy,
Yeah.
which I won't wholeheartedly say this, but at times maybe losing a parent might not be as bad as seeing your parents divorce because the extreme, hate sometimes parents can have
Each
towards
other,
one
yeah.
another
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
trickle down to the kids.
Of course,
So,
for sure.
but still, it's very sad to lose a parent as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Okay, Shish. So you're in Eritrea. I know this is already it's already
It's already
deep.
heavy, yeah.
And it's the journey. You didn't choose it, but it also has created who you are today and the person that we get to encounter. So you have an older sister. How many years older is she than you?
Sister's 6 years older than me.
Okay.
So it's me and my older brother are 3 years apart. Me and my sister are 6 years apart, and me and my oldest brother, we're 8 years apart. So it's 3-3-2.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So were you guys just significantly closer?
Yeah, I mean that
Or
kind
did
of.
she become like mom number 2?
Yeah, I mean it's her role was kind of carved without her even thinking about it. But
Yeah.
honestly, props to her. She had the heart and the character to love on us and be selfless enough to look after us
Yeah.
at such a young age. I mean,
Yeah.
when I say 6 years apart, if I was when I was 4, she was 10?
Yeah.
So she was very young as
Yeah.
well. But I think her heart was just, she still is one that I can't explain how she did it at that time. She's very wise beyond her age. She's very
What
loving.
did she do though? When you say how did she do? What did she do?
She just stepped up as far as like in the care aspect of emotionally being there for us, answering the questions that we might have had, looking after us in the practical sense as far as like making food or
Yeah.
things that we needed at that time
Yeah.
when my parents were busy,
Yeah.
when my mom was busy, or
Yeah.
when we were when my dad was
Yeah.
a little distant from us. So she was always present to kind of fill that void in a lot of ways. And her significant role that is also the main reason how I was able to develop my relationship with God, which we will talk
Yeah.
about more. But looking back now and putting myself in her shoes to do what she was doing
Yeah.
at that age, to be so selfless and so loving and so caring for her 2 younger siblings
Yeah.
I think it's the most touching and inspiring thing that I could look for at that time. So
Yeah.
I didn't need to look far
Yeah. She was
to
right
be
there.
inspired, to be
Yeah.
impacted.
Yeah.
And she was also amazing in school.
Yeah.
She was so smart.
Yeah.
In a sense, she kind of made us look bad,
Yeah.
but she also inspired us to do better.
Yeah.
She was smart, hardworking, loving, and selfless in so many ways
Yeah.
that she just carried herself.
Did she have anybody to look up to? I'm not saying that your mom wasn't there, but I
Yeah.
mean, like, in order for her to like, is there an aunt? Is there something that she's looking at, or this is just a gift that God has given her?
I've never asked her that question, so I don't know. But I think it's it's a mix of few things. One is I think she had the heart for it. She had the character for it. Partly because she also saw the early development to things falling apart.
But she responded differently.
Yeah, exactly.
She could have just been like, I'm another sibling, I'm another child that's also dealing with what they're dealing with.
She could have been full of depression. She could have,
and she's older,
struggled.
So she's experiencing more things and knows more things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure her memories are a lot more vivid than mine, and I'm sure she remembers a lot more detailed development in our household or what was taking place in our home more than I do.
Yeah.
So I'm sure to go through that and respond in such a way, I think it's
And I ask that because it's one thing if there's like an aunt or a mentor that's like, hey, all right, you can do this, like step up for your brothers. And I'm sure there's people speaking into that in the caring aspect. But and now going into like the faith aspect, like I'm just so interested into at a young age for her to be so serious enough to start imparting things into your life. I think if it's not someone that's actually discipling her, then it is literally the hand of God that's like, I'm going to use this girl to speak into this household a different way.
100%. I think it's also, I was thinking about this earlier today. I feel like we respond to our relationship with God or the angle of our relationship with God based on the characteristics we have.
That we already have. Yeah.
Right?
I guess like we're predisposed, I guess, to respond. I mean, he knows how we're going to respond to him too also. Yeah.
He knows better than we do for sure. But like, her response and her...
Well, actually, before we say that, how did she hear the gospel?
Yeah. I mean, so to go to that, she was also the first person that accepted Christ. Or she became born again, is how we know it, right? I mean, my family is a Orthodox-based family.
Yes, so Christian,
Yeah, Christian family, Christian household, but not really too deep in the church.
Yes.
And when we moved to Eritrea, there was kind of like a movement that was taking place to kind of renew the faith or...
the Orthodox specifically?
The Orthodox specifically.
Okay. To establish it,
to reestablish it in a sense, to kind of point people back to the word, point people back to the relationship with
you think government-wise or as big as government or as big as like, because I know sometimes it is kind of...
No, I think this was more of like a set of visionary people.
Okay, so missionaries, people.
They're not even missionary. They're actually people that are Eritreans.
Okay.
That were just had the heart for the Lord and that heart to discover more of God. So
there's a move of God. Then.
Yeah. Okay. But in their mindset, instead of moving out of the Orthodox Church and kind of defining ourselves this non-denominational or Pentecostal church, which was not as attractive in that community back then, their understanding was, let's take it more inwards. Let's restore the Orthodox Church. Let's renew the Orthodox faith and help people get closer to God in that way instead of isolating ourselves from the church.
Yes,
that was very significant,
That's
very
wise. Okay,
exactly.
I didn't know this. Okay,
yeah, these people.
How big or how small is it? Like local, like in your community, in your street, and like the city. Like how big or how small is this movement?
Yeah, it was taking place in Asmara, and it took. It took it exploded, especially with the young people that were hungry for the Lord, that were looking for something new. Because now, post the second war that took place, the border war, people were, young people were inclined to grow in their faith, in their academics, in profession, in many ways. There's
a lot of questions, I'm sure.
And that's one other thing about like Eritreans in general. We're very prideful people, like I said earlier, but also we're also very hardworking.
Yes.
And that came because of the struggle that we went through and also because of this deep desire that we had to developing our country or developing our nation in a very significant way. So that also had this fire amongst the youth to discover God as well. So when this movement took place, it just spread like wildfire in the youth because it was refreshing, it was new, and it was growing to becoming more of a threat to the government in a sense. I don't know if you know much about Eritrea, but Eritrea it's a very communist state that is very secular. Of course, the majority of religion is Islam and Christianity.
Yeah.
And if you break down Christianity, it's Orthodoxy over majority, and then Catholicism, and then Lutheran. So these are like the recognized religions in the country.
Okay.
But as far as like the government, they were very secular, communist, dictator-based.
Oh, so no religion.
Government. The government
What do you mean by
is
secular?
a very secular in a sense where they don't really...
Promote?
They're not inspired by religion as far as
Okay.
like the policies.
That's different.
And
That's different.
Oh, it's significant, especially
Yeah.
compared to America,
Yes.
where we have in God we trust
Yes,
everywhere.
Yes. Well, even Ethiopia at a
Or
certain point.
even Ethiopia at a
Yeah.
certain point as well. But Eritrea is a very anti-God, secular,
Liberal.
yeah, like, yeah, liberal in a sense, but more communist.
Okay. That's
More
awesome. Gotcha.
China type of
Okay, gotcha,
government.
gotcha.
So
Yeah,
that's the structure of the government in Eritrea. So
Okay.
that, the movement that was taking place in the church was becoming more of a threat for the
Okay.
government at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is what was taking place.
So then that affected her.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we, ironically,
Yeah.
and there's a reason why I say ironically,
Yeah.
our dad took us to that church.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
I
What
know.
is this, a behavior management, or what's the reason?
No, I think my dad is
I say the behavior
something-
management because a lot of times that's...
Yeah, of course. But I think
where
my
our parents
dad
take
was
us.
always something I always admired of him is very disciplined, and also
okay.
he, in a lot of ways, he was always running after God.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and seeing how refreshing this faith was becoming in the church at that time,
He wanted
he
you guys-
needed that for himself.
Wow. And not
As a
even for you. It wasn't for you.
Not just for us.
Okay, that's why I was saying
I
like
think he
behavior
needed it for
okay.
himself,
Oh,
even though
wow.
he hasn't verbally admitted it to myself.
Yes.
Thinking back now at the stuff that was taking place in our family,
Yeah.
he was going through a lot of depression. I'm sure he
Yeah.
was going through a lot of stress.
Was he
needed
not
a way out.
serious, like a serious, like orthodox?
Yeah, he was serious, but he wasn't as religious
And I'm saying orthodox,
as we know.
yeah, exactly.
He's
I'm
not
talking about
as
like
religious.
the way our parents, our
Exactly.
families were, where it's like cultural. Like
No.
I'm not changing this
He
kind of.
wasn't like that.
Okay.
And
okay.
that in itself was
The fact that
big
he was willing
credit
to
to
take
him.
us, yeah.
He's a guy that always respected culture. He's a guy that respected discipline and tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to faith, he was more wise in how he approached God
Okay.
and how he seeked God. Even though I wouldn't say he's born again, at least in the manner that he pursued God wasn't like the traditional, like,
Yeah.
strict Orthodox
Yeah.
parents. He
Yeah.
wasn't like that.
He was willing to
took us
go,
that
though.
church.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then my sister is the first one that caught on fire.
Okay.
Fire of the Holy
She
Spirit in a
responded.
sense,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Also, me and my brother were going with her at the time, but we were also young.
Yes.
But she was the one that just caught on and just took it extremely serious.
Yeah.
She wasn't playing with her faith.
Yeah.
She found God at such a young age
Yeah.
that it was just the most important thing in her life.
Yeah.
I have a funny story to tell you.
Okay.
Back then, when we first started going to the church, like becoming born again in Eritrea is a bit different than America.
Okay,
I feel
why?
like here people are more charismatic.
I gotcha.
We listen to music.
Yes,
There's a lot of things we
Freedom.
do that that gives us
Yeah.
a bit more freedom.
Yeah.
But there, due to the the struggle that we were going through, people were a lot more serious, a lot
Yeah.
more disciplined, and a lot more spiritual in a sense in the way they practice their day-to-day life.
For sure.
Part of it was not listening to secular music.
For sure.
And then I remember this is like maybe a month after, going to the church, and we constantly started going to the
Yeah.
church.
And Dad would take you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our dad would take us every Sunday, and then
Okay.
we would go on Saturday for the kids
Bible
ministry,
okay.
Bible study.
Okay, cool.
One of the things she learned is that to not listen to secular music.
Is like, yeah, okay. What she do to you?
And the funny thing is, there was one afternoon where there was a song playing and she turned it
In the
off, and
house?
she was like, in the house. And she was like, no, we're not supposed to listen to secular music.
Was mom in the house?
Mommy wasn't at the
Okay.
house. So she was just trying to use that as a teaching moment for
Yeah.
me and my brother.
Yeah.
And then she was just, telling us, we're not supposed to listen to secular music. We're only supposed to listen to worship songs.
Yeah.
I kid you not, it was like 30 minutes later or something. She starts singing a very, like, a secular song that we've always known growing up in our home. And me and my brother looked at her. We were like,
ma'am.
What? You was just saying that?
She's growing. She's trying.
No. And then she was like, but this is not bad. This is something we've known all our life.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet. Poor
That
thing.
story
Y'all still
would
bring it up?
never leave my mind, because it was such a special moment. It's such a very
she's
simple,
trying. She's young.
Yeah.
She's trying. Yeah.
But then it was a reflection of just how like strict she was, how disciplined she was with
and
the
childlike at the
principles that
exact
she
same
had.
time.
But then at the same time, there's moments that she had because she was young.
Yeah.
She was a young girl.
Yeah.
So at that time, so that moment I will never forget. But from then, her growth in just growing close with God and, being very disciplined and being very, like, strong in her faith was, it is like no other.
Okay.
Especially for a girl that's
young.
like 12,
Yeah.
13,
Yeah.
that is also looking after her two younger brothers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how it happened for her. And
Yeah. Was she very intentional with you guys, or do you kind of just follow along?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so we started going to the church, like I said, because of my dad. And from then on, we caught on, and my sister just, whether my dad took us or not, we would go.
Yeah.
At the same time, every day, 7 p.m., we would pray together.
At night.
And I'm not saying like a 10, 15 minutes prayer. I'm talking about like a whole hour, 2 hours.
No way.
I kid you not.
Were you actually praying, or were you falling asleep?
She was praying.
No way. At 12 years old?
It started at 12. Every day, 7 p.m. I will never forget this. Every day at 7. Doesn't matter what we were doing, whether we were doing homework, whether we were watching TV, whether we were watching a movie.
Who was discipling this girl?
Listen, when I say discipline, I've seen nothing like this.
Wow.
And we're when I say prayer, we're like prayer, like,
She said she should pray.
man, we're going through all sorts of prayer. Like, I learned how to pray at that time, not later when I grew up. Like, and how intentional she was.
It's hard to pray for 2 hours, like
100%.
as an adult, let alone
100%. I mean, now I think about it, I'm like, it's crazy that we had that much fire. Not that we had, but like we were so we were on fire so much that nothing was important.
Wow.
When it came to the time we gave to God, or the time we spent with God. And the intentionality of her is not just the time that we started or how long we prayed, it's also the manner that we prayed. She wasn't leading us at all times. She made me lead prayer. Wow. She made my brother lead prayer. She was leading us in prayer.
Oh, she's incredible.
She was incredible. And then along with prayer, we read the Bible every single day.
Yeah.
To the point where we knew every story in the Bible at such a young age.
Yes.
But to see that being done by herself and no one kind of looking after her, or no one kind of, keeping tabs of her is the biggest inspiration I can find in my faith.
Before we move on, I have to ask you a question. Yeah. When you hear that story and you watch what happened with her, specifically with her, what did that teach you about God when you think about it now? Like, whether it's the pursuit of how he pursues people, the attributes he gives you to respond to him. Yeah. Like, what did that show you about God? Because that doesn't seem like a normal 12-year-old.
No.
So
yeah, I mean, it's like we all, like I said, it wasn't just my sister my dad started taking us to church, and then my sister was
just following, or like, being
obedient,
us,
or disciplining us in such a way that we did that with her every day. It's also, we had to go through our personal journeys as well. I had to find God my own way.
Yes.
I don't know what made her that way.
Yeah.
Actually, I should ask her one time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if there's one answer, because you can say it's the Lord, pursues and you respond, and it's irresistible grace. You can say a lot of things about it, but I'm curious how you kind of, I mean, I'm sure she has her own opinion.
That's what I'm saying. So for her, I don't know. For myself,
what do you think? Yeah.
It was this story would never leave my mind. At a time where I was a young boy, with my mom and dad, separated and living with my mom, one of the biggest things that you kind of desire or that you want is a male figure, a father, a dad, and that's at that time. And there was a point where I was really missing my dad.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're in an environment like Eritrea, it's like there's so much struggle, there's so much things going around you. You don't want to admit these emotional things, but it's a very real thing.
Yeah.
And at the time that I was missing my dad a lot, he wasn't as present because of his own struggles that he was going through.
Yes.
And there was a point where one time I was just weeping because of not having my father around.
You felt the absence,
And I was very young, maybe like 6, 7 years old,
Okay.
5, 6, something like that. In that moment where I was weeping by myself, there was a moment where I encountered God, where there was a big hole of a fatherhood that was missing, being filled like practically and emotionally and physically, feeling a sense of security, feeling a sense of joy, feeling a sense of peace. Because as I was weeping, I was also praying.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on? I was talking to God, like, what is going on? Like, how could he do this to us? How could he hate us?
And why?
Which is a very real thing to go through as a kid from a, separated or divorced family, is you look at things as black and white. But my dad had his own struggles. My mom had her own struggles. But for us, it's like,
your mom and dad.
The instant reaction is like, why do they hate us? Or why do they do this? Why are they not around? When I was going through that prayer and weeping moment, that's when I sensed God wholly.
Okay.
That's when I felt his presence in me, and then filling the gap of fatherhood that I had at that time.
Yeah.
That moment was so real that it explained everything for me.
Okay.
I can't quite explain it, but it explained everything.
Yeah.
And it assured me that I was never alone.
Yeah.
So that encounter is what led me to just continually pursue
So that
God.
became the basis of the first encounter, the relationship with God. Like it's it's actually interesting. It's like the first time I meet somebody or the first time you meet someone, you say, hi, hello, nice to meet you. That sets the foundation of who that that person.
Yeah.
You can't say I've never met you unless you forget. So it's almost like that, where it's like, I met Jesus, I know him, and then everything that happens after that is based off of that foundation.
And it's like, from then on, it was a complete transformation. Obviously, I needed to respond with God filling me with that security and joy at that moment. But the transformation that I went through as a young kid was completely different. I was more joyful. I was more secure. I was very confident in who I am, and who I was at that time. And these characteristics started developing and growing more as I pursued God more and more as well.
Yeah.
So that pivotal moment, which is very ironic, where I was seeking a father, but I found my Holy Father that was just with me forever.
And the more that you seek him, the more you see yourself.
Yeah.
And the more that you know yourself, and the more that you're able to,
felt
that's
more
so
secure.
interesting.
So it's that profound moment that I was able to experience God and just carried on running after him.
So do you think that was the first time that you felt like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was, and
how often
it didn't take a lot.
How often do you remember that moment? And even now?
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
Every day. I think it's to the point where whether I'm happy or sad or anxious, or it could be anything.
Yeah.
Or even when I encounter people in different lifestyles and different, life stages.
Yeah.
That moment of security and realness that I felt made up my mind of what my life was about to be.
Okay.
Or what my life was going to represent. And that also represented, and it affected my tone and response to people's decision making and how they led their life. Because I've always felt secure, and I've always never felt a sense of peer pressure as far as like engaging in certain, always.
But that confidence is not going to just happen in that one encounter with God. That confidence is also going to be established as you're continuing to have a relationship with him. Yeah. Because now he's pouring into you, you're reading the word, you're praying. There's a relationship that's establishing who Shish is, who God is, who Shish is, who God is, right? That back and forth. Yeah. So I guess we can go a little fast, but you moved to the States. Okay, so you're in Eritrea, you grew up in Eritrea, you're 17 years old. Did anything shake that moving forward, or you kind of were consistent in the way that you sought after the Lord?
Well, it's
before you moved. At least.
The encounter required a response, and the response developed a lifestyle.
Do you think you were wise to respond? Like, do you remember the consciousness of responding to God consistently, or do you think it was like a grace that God is giving? I mean, it could be both, but
It was a couple of things. There was a discipline that I had, but then the main credit I give to in this process is my sister.
Okay.
If I didn't have my sister, the consistency of how I pursued God, I don't know if it would have been the same.
yeah,
But having her at that time is what I needed.
yeah,
So the response was kind of led by my sister. Yeah, I had to.
you have it, you desire it.
Yeah. But the daily pursuit at such a young age
So it
was
just
because
speaks
of my
to
sister.
like why discipleship and mentorship and
100%.
community and all that. So she was all of that for
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
But that made it our life now, and that became our lifestyle.
You're not doing
that we
it
knew
alone.
at 7 p.m. that it was prayer time.
Yeah.
We knew that we couldn't go by
God.
a day
I was
without
praying at
praying
that
and reading the Word, and
Jesus.
it just filled us with
Confidence,
the
the establishment, like the
meaning of life.
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
so because
Absolutely. At a young
we
age.
understood what life meant at such a young
in the
age
struggle,
because of that.
In the struggle, it all made sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that led on to, before we even talk about me coming to America, there was a lot of persecution that started taking place. You remember I mentioned earlier
Yes.
the
government,
the speedy or the immediate growth in the seeking of God that was taking place in the youth at that time. The movement became a threat, and the government recognized this and used it in a way to dissect the community and also create some sort of division within the community.
Because it's a unified movement, and
it's in a sense it's a strategy to continue a power or any sort of control that you have over people. This is also based in my layer of profession that I've had in legal and policy, which we'll talk about later. But I was able to understand that then because there was a clear division created by the government, and then to start this organic persecution of born again believers at that time.
We don't want to get into the politics of it because I want to hear your story, but what's the selling point? It's for a government that doesn't push religion, all of a sudden now religion is going to be persecuted. Why?
Yeah, I mean, the propaganda was, this is something foreign, not like ours. This is untraditional and is been created by the Americans in the West to create for the downfall of the country. So that was the catching phrase that used, and it took like wildfire, especially to the community that was very prideful, like I said, very hardworking, and very like loving, but at the same time very, very strong in protecting their own.
Yeah.
This was the key ingredient they needed.
Yeah.
The government kind of infused in the community, which was very easy to do, but then it just took like that small piece to create that big significant division. And then we started getting persecuted. Our church got closed. Our pastors have been locked up for over 20 years now with no one knowing where they are. Still to this day. And still no one's asking about them as well. So that kind of fueled the other aspect of my life.
And you're watching that happen as you're acting. So how do you not walk away from this faith while you're watching persecution happen?
Again, I mean, our understanding of our faith at that time wasn't like how the Western community believe
or comfortability.
It's about being persecuted and God meeting you there and finding a sense of joy in the midst of chaos, finding security in the midst of danger. Like when I say like Psalm 23 has been the foundational aspect of my life. Yeah, you prepare a meal amongst my enemies. That's like
we are speaking Psalms 23, having experienced no persecution, no challenges. I mean, in our simple life, the simple challenges that when I'm talking about, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm talking about, I wanted to buy a house and I can't buy a house.
Yeah, my job let me go.
I got laid off.
Which are very big, significant
it's okay,
things. But
based on your experience. Yes, things. Absolutely.
And we knew God as our savior rather than our monetary provider.
Yeah.
That's not how we knew God. And the people we looked up to, like one of the most significant Christian figures was Watchman Nee, which a lot of people in America don't know.
Yeah, I know.
very iconic
And you
Chinese
remember-
Christian. Oh yeah, we read his book when I was 10.
That's crazy.
My sister read us his book.
That's crazy. The fact that that's
And-
being given to her, that's amazing.
Imagine.
Yeah.
She was like, 15, 16, reading his
That's
book.
crazy.
And knowing even the details of persecution that he went through and finding strength in that, because the Chinese government were doing a lot of crazy things to
Yeah.
born again Christians. They still do. But those are the type of stories we held on to find strength, to find encouragement, and then to constantly see God in the midst of darkness and finding light in that darkness.
So many questions.
So that is
Oh my
what
goodness.
represented my life there. But the good thing is, it's not just my pursuit of God that was inspired by that, but it's also my career choice was also inspired by that. That kind of opened my eyes to always seek to stand for people, to always seek to represent people, to always speak for people that are hurt, that are abused, that are that don't have a voice to speak for themselves. So it's that area of my life became open because of that, because of those experiences that I've went through at a young age. So that made it more significant to not just pursue God, but also pursue God by standing for others as well.
Gotcha. Okay, I have some questions and I'm trying to figure out how to build up to it. So forget coming to America. Before you come to America, I think there's like two things I want to touch on. Okay, one, so while you're there, and I think I almost forgot this part, that's why. While you're in Eritrea and you're visually like hearing about persecution and you're seeing all of these things happen, you have a community, an established group around you. So that, okay, that's, and you already have an established understanding of God. So your faith, like I think, okay, if a Western person, if tomorrow persecution happened in America, I feel like we would respond differently than someone that grew up already with a struggle. Yeah. For you, Christianity was established through struggle. Your faith and your relationship was established through struggle. So as you grew up, you're watching. Faith was never something that was comfortable or convenient. It was always a challenge, right? Whereas if it was the other way around and you were now being thrown in as an adult into struggle, I think you might respond differently. So then, okay, so let's go to America. You came here.
Yeah.
How was that for you as an adult coming and witnessing somewhat a comfortable Christianity?
Yeah.
And that the other part is, now that you're witnessing this comfortable Christianity, how is that not contagious to you? How does that not change the way, or did it change the way that you worked with God?
I mean,
so now there's no fight. You don't have to go to church, but if you do go to church, you're not, death is not waiting for you. There is really no valley.
I mean, it's my understanding of the versatility of the enemy became more clear when I came to America. And let me explain.
That's crazy.
Yeah, let me explain. The reason I say that is because it's always described in the Bible that the enemy is creative. Yeah. He will find many ways.
He's not as hidden.
Exactly. Yeah. He will find many ways to attack the followers of God. And in that sense, that shows you how strategic he is in the way he attacks people or he attacks communities of God. That revelation I got was very clear when I came to America, because a lot of times all I thought was, if you're a Christian, you're always going to be persecuted.
Yeah.
That's the thought that I had.
That's what you saw.
But in America, you're not as persecuted. Maybe now it's changing, especially in 2024.
It still wouldn't call it persecution.
There's ideological persecution taking place in America, which is kind of a new nature, something we're going through together. But prior to that, it was more of like an internal flesh battle that you got to go through, where you're battling comfort, you're battling easiness of life, you're battling.
It is a secular world, sure. We feel the secularness of it, yeah.
But it showed me a different layer of maturing as a Christian, which is very required for every single Christian as well. Now, and it even made me more understanding to a lot of Western or American Christians.
From the beginning, were you
No,
understanding
no, no,
in the
no.
beginning?
In the beginning, I was quite heartless. I was
Okay.
like, why are y'all people complaining? This is like, life is easy.
I can go to church.
Why are you not
publicly?
going? Yeah, exactly. Why are you not pursuing God more?
Yeah.
Even though things are easier.
But was it not distracting of all the things that are comfortable too for
But
you?
that's the thing. That's the understanding I later got.
Okay.
So obviously the things that I was challenged by started changing. For sake of being charismatic, now I started growing more comfortable.
Yeah.
My discipline got lessened in a sense. And that kind of created this unhealthy, I guess, pursuit and process of pursuit to God, where it's not as consistent, it's not as disciplined as it used to be, because I'm not as desperate.
Yeah.
I'm not as endangered as I thought I used to be.
Yes.
You
won't die. You won't. Nothing will change if you go a
exactly.
month or two without.
Exactly. My dependence, or I became more self-reliant than God reliant in a sense.
Yeah.
So that kind of made everything kind of the tip of my fingers so that makes me more grow dependent with myself rather than depending on God.
Yeah.
So that kind of created an opportunity to kind of reflect and understand what those issues are in America and then kind of respond, which is what I did eventually. It's like at first it was like I was never forgetful of God. I was always close to God. I was always going to church. I was always disciplined enough, but I started growing the heart for people. I started understanding the struggles they have here and the many things they're challenged by in the Western world. Yeah. So it made me more loving to people and more understanding to people's struggles instead of being first critical.
Yeah.
Which is what I give all credit to God because it's hard. Both of them are hard.
Yeah.
Being persecuted is extremely hard.
Of course.
And then being in the U.S. and struggling with comfort is also extremely hard.
Yes.
They're just different facets of struggle.
So when you look at both worlds, very different from one another.
Yeah.
What did you learn about God? What does that tell you about God?
I think it was.
And I say that to say, he's not changing. He's the same God for the persecuted, and he's the same God for the comfortable. It's just our response is different to that. But those are very different worlds.
Yeah, I think what I said earlier resonated more with me than understanding.
Can I add?
Okay, let me say this.
Okay.
My understanding of God developed from being, like this guard and this, king that I'm always, afraid of in a sense, in a respectful fear in a sense of authority, a sense of reverence, to becoming more a relationship type of father.
Here in the States.
Yeah, in the States. I developed those things here in the States. Because I think it's because the things I ran to God for started changing.
Yeah.
In a sense, they started developing, maturing, but at the same time, they changed.
Yeah.
I was also growing from being a child to becoming a man.
Yeah, and it's like the things I'm coming to you for. Now I'm coming to you as a friend. I may not need anything from you, but I'm still going to pray and tell you I love you and I want to spend time with you. Yeah.
And I think it's God designed our family structure in a way that we pursue him as well. I've always believed this. Now, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but there are elements in how he pursues us that he's designed the family structure.
Oh, you mean even the order of birth?
Yeah.
Okay.
When we were kids, we respond to our parents in a sense of fear and respect and authority, where we respond more to not disobeying them rather than having a relationship with them or pleasing them in a sense. And that slowly grows, especially if their parents have done a good enough job to raise you. Your relationship with the parents changes as you're growing up. From fearing them, we started growing to love them and becoming more friends with them. And it was very parallel with my relationship with God at that time. I ran to God back home when I was afraid. I was desperate. I found a sense of security with him, and I also was very fearful from disobeying his laws and the things he desired for us. to later becoming, okay, now let me grow with him. Let me talk to him on a day-to-day basis. Let me not just ask for things, but also
He's my friend.
talk to him.
Yeah.
And, so it was very parallel, organic,
So it's not only that
process.
you moved to a different country,
Yeah.
it's also that you grew up too.
Exactly.
So both things were happening at the same time.
They were happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I went the opposite, where I was here at a young age and then moved to Eritrea, I think my relationship with God would have been dramatically different.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I got the security aspect or the reverence
It
and
went
the fear,
along with it,
authoritative aspect of my relationship with God happened at a young age, which is also very similar that you go through as a child. And then coming here to become more the friendship and the, the constant pursuit that you go through in loving someone.
Yeah.
So it was very organic and very natural, but coincidentally took place
At the same time.
At
So
the
it
same
helped. It helped. That's
Oh, yeah.
beautiful. Okay. So, the part that I definitely want to touch on is I have my relationship with God. And you talked a little bit about like parents and stuff like that. One of the most significant things that I learned about my understanding with God, it was the way that I saw my father, my biological father, and the way that I saw God was very similar. And there's a lot of good things and bad things with that. I have a really great relationship with my dad, so I didn't understand God the Father. So the reason why I'm bringing that example is to say we all have a different journey in the way that we relate and understand who God is. So I grew up in Eritrea, experienced that level of faith, that relationship with God, that upbringing, trauma, challenges, celebrations, whatever. Come to America, same thing. And then now you grow up, right? So as an adult, continuing your faith, steadfast in your disciplines, in relationship with God, you date, you get engaged, you're about to get married. Who you are today, you reflect back on all of these experiences who God is, which are very different from the common person. So I have two questions. One, when you look at your own personal journey with Jesus and you look at it, how do you, when you're looking at who this God is and you're experiencing all of these things, how does your brain kind of, how does your brain kind of reconcile, this is what I've learned, this is what I've taken from all of my experiences, this is what sustained me, this is the disciplines that I needed, this is, what does that journey tell you? Like when you look back at it, if you can.
Yeah.
It's a very,
No.
Okay, do you get my question?
It's a very good question.
Okay,
I think I do. So
Okay, let's try it, and then I'll put some words. I'll try.
Maybe you can cater the question a bit more if I'm not answering it.
Because there's like something I'm trying to say, but I'm
it makes sense.
Let's do it. Let's try.
Okay, so for me, I hope this explains it, but
okay. If not, I'll keep pushing.
A lot of times, I've seen my relationship with God as my Father made perfect.
Okay.
If my Father on earth can be the most perfect.
Gotcha. The ideal version.
The most ideal, perfect example of my Father
is
was
who you
God.
See God. Okay.
For me.
Yes.
That is what determined my tone and how I viewed God and how I pursued God and how I respected God and how I honored God.
Okay.
And those are different layers in a way that it represented my characteristics and the way I followed God. But then that also made me understand the significance of being a husband and a father as well, which is something I feel like is the most important responsibility I have as a grown man. But until I get to that point, I need to completely understand what that meant at a young age. So my understanding with my dad made perfect being in God, that's what set my tone in pursuing him.
Gotcha.
And that also made me more loving and forgiving to my father.
Okay.
Because I think I love my dad, really love my dad. But in the sense of how our life trajectory went, I'm not supposed to love my dad.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to have a relationship with my dad. But
That's
it's
good. This
the
is
element,
good.
it's the element of my dad made perfect in God. Kind of made me look past his flaws.
You because you're gaining this love and this experience, and you
I was already
have this
fulfilled.
God. Yeah,
I was fulfilled
you can
with the
love
things I
him.
needed from
You
a
don't-
father
yeah.
from God.
It's good.
So that made me look past my father's
Yes,
flaws.
yes.
But then it made me learn from my father's flaws and not to and the
Repeat.
things not to do
Yes.
when I become a father.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I still don't fully understand. I don't think if I ever will. I think this is something we're slowly talking through and breaking down with my dad at this age. But I don't think I would fully understand the mindset he was going through at that time when things he worked hard for, completely decimated.
Sheesh,
In a matter of 2 years.
How old do you think he was at that time?
He was like 35, 36.
So forget, we won't even take you to 30. Imagine where you are right. How old are you right now?
28.
Okay, at 28 years old, imagine you've done all of this.
Yeah.
And somebody comes and dismantles everything you've done.
Yeah.
That's and you don't have a faith and a relationship with God to sustain you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times I'm speaking more of my dad because I'm a man and I feel like I resonate responsibility wise to him and what he was going through. But my mom, oh my God. I mean, we'll have probably another conversation from my mom because I can talk for days and how loving, how caring, how sacrificial.
Yeah.
She wasn't perfect.
Yes.
But to me, she was perfect.
Yeah.
She was an angel.
Yeah.
Whereas my dad, the perfection I needed was from God. Yeah. And I was able to look past his flaws because we weren't as close as we wanted and we needed it to be. Yeah. But that set the tone of fatherhood, of what God meant at that age, and also understanding to pursue my dad, my earthly father, without expecting anything. Yeah. Which also set the tone
because there's an unconditional love here, so you don't need anything from this. I can love you and see you the way Jesus sees you,
and without my knowledge,
the way that He does. Yeah.
Without my knowledge, that also set the tone in how I pursued my relationship with people. Yeah. So whenever I'm being friends with people, whenever I develop a sense of relationship with people, I give in without expecting anything in return, which helps me to stay emotionally stable
and the freedom,
but constantly loving towards people.
Okay, so the next question I was going to ask you, I think...
Did that answer the question?
You know, I don't even know what I said to you. I don't know what the question was, but you answered it. I don't even know how... it was perfect. Because when I was thinking about it, I was like, what did I just ask him? Because I don't know how he answered this so well. I promise you those were English words. Anyways, the next question I was going to ask you was that when you deal with people, and this is something that I struggle with myself, where sometimes because the struggles that I've gone through or challenges that I've come, when I see people that are kind of, you're sitting at a table and you hear people complain. You hear people like, you know where I'm headed with this, right? You hear people complain or, and it could be in different, like what I'm going to get bothered by and what you're going to get bothered by are two different things. But you're sitting at a table and people are complaining about X, Y, and Z, whatever. And you have an experience. You have a struggle that you've come from. For example, somebody can talk about, childbearing, and for a mother that has, gone through a bunch of miscarriages, sitting at a table, hearing people talk about, the ease of children or like, oh, my child did this, can be bothersome. Yeah. So what my original question was going to be was, when you are at the table and you're seeing people based off of experience that you have complain or talk in a certain way, and you see kind of like an ease of their life, or like, what a privilege. You are privileged. You haven't gone through certain pains or challenges that I've gone through. Yeah. Two things. One, how do you respond in a godly way that's not judgmental or reacting? And if you do, let's say you do, is it because of what you just said, the way that you see your father and the way that God is giving you? Is it because of God, or is it because you kind of learned, we have two different worlds? Like, how do you sit at that table and have a different past? And not to say that your past is different. It could literally be a mother that has gone through, a child that has passed away. It could be a divorced person that's hearing married couples complain about marriage. Like, we all have different stories that we're coming. But for you, I don't even know. Did I ask that question?
No, you did. Because that is something I constantly think about almost every encounter I have with people.
Because it is different.
Yeah.
And as American raised children, I know we sound crazy.
And also my response has dramatically changed as time went by. Yeah.
Even as Christians, I'm sure we sound crazy.
How I was when I was 17, with the no nonsense type of mindset coming fresh in America. Yeah. Like any opportunity I had, I was ready to share my story and kind of put people in their place. Yeah. Which
So I guess when did you learn the grace? When
Yeah,
did
you
you
know,
stop yeah. When did you start getting mad at us?
And I mean, I remember there was times where I was not in a hateful way. I'd never hated
no,
people.
it's based on your reaction, based on your experience.
Exactly.
It's not even.
But
You're just like,
my
hey.
response was always no nonsense. I was
Okay.
like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, this is
Do
very
you know
minor.
what's happening back
yeah,
home?
like, do you know?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what I think was it Kevin Hart or something made a joke when someone was like, I think it was Dave Chappelle.
Okay.
Dave Chappelle, I love
Somebody,
Dave Chappelle,
okay.
by
Is there a
the way.
Dave
But he
Chappelle?
was making the joke where if I'm hungry and I'm begging and you tell me about Africans not having food, what does that have to do with me?
Yeah.
At this point, I'm struggling with this and I need a solution for this.
And this is my worldview,
Yeah.
and this is my experience.
He said it in a much more funnier way. I put it in a very poor
Interesting, okay.
manner. But that was the gist of it, of
Yeah.
what the point he was making. And it's something that I had to practically go through and grow out of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I saying my discipline and my mindset and the no nonsense belief that I have is wrong? No.
Mm-hmm.
But in the way you deliver to help people get out of their issues,
Yes.
became more mature.
Yes.
It changed.
Yes.
And it took time.
Yes.
And it took relationships with
Yes.
people to kind of get to the point. Am I there? No, not yet. But
Yeah.
I'm growing.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're all growing, but
Yes.
like I'm constantly growing in that aspect.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say though is this helped me become better in not being subjective in finding a solution. I think in a lot of conversations I engage with people, I tend to stand out because of this understanding that I have. What about maybe this is not the end all be all of the solution. Maybe
Okay.
this could also be possible if you
Okay.
approach it this way.
Okay.
So my approach in
Kind
discussions
of
with
give you a
people,
world, like a bigger perspective,
Exactly.
a bigger worldview.
and that's partly because of my international background, my international based faith background, to kind of start looking at life in less black and white and more holistic, objective, kind of seeking truth in
Right.
in the midst of it, but
Right.
not being very strict in one aspect.
Yeah.
So when people say if something happens, and I mean I'm not ruffle some feathers here, if people are stressing or going through depression, oh, therapy is the only option. I'm like, therapy is a great option.
Yes.
Always try to seek advice, counsel, seek therapy in all aspects,
Of course.
as much as you can.
Of course.
That's not the end all be all. Also, have you tapped in the depth of your faith and
Yeah.
finding God in that
Yes.
issue and that struggle?
Yes.
Maybe that approach could also be beneficial. So I'm using that
Because you've been
the
in
most
a
relevant
situation.
example in this sense, but
Yeah.
there's many things
Yeah.
in life that people talk about, that people struggle with, that is not always just this one solution for
Right.
it.
Because you've been in situations where you didn't have those solutions,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you've seen people work through these problems. So now, okay, so not only
Yeah.
not only are you learning how to give grace to people that come from a different privileged background,
Yeah.
you also are learning how to bring different solutions to the
Yeah.
table, because hey, there's other options here as well for you.
100%.
That's actually very productive.
Yeah, and it's a very internal process everybody has to go
Yeah.
through to find grace
Yeah.
for people there, and also provide an alternative view, an alternative option that could be beneficial for them, but also delivering it in a more loving and caring way,
Yeah.
and kind of differentiating playful conversations with serious conversations,
Right.
where at times I feel like people have a hard time dissecting when I'm being playful and being
Yes.
serious,
Yeah.
which is challenging, but
Yeah.
but it's the lightheartedness way of viewing life and struggles,
Yeah.
and finding all my security in God that makes me that playful and,
Yeah.
more
I
lighthearted.
think, and the reason why I ask this question is because I think when you, and it's like, again, not to isolate or separate you from a group, but I think because you do have a different background or kind of experience than most of the people that are your peers right now. Now, if you were in a room full of people that had your same background, there's an understanding.
Oh, yeah.
But because you're not, I'm pretty sure that when conversations are being had, there is a level of grace and understanding, and even the way that you deliver, that has to be a lot more intentional. I'm sure God uses it as a way to refine you as well. But
There's one thing I wanted to
Yeah.
point out, and the closest relationships I've developed with people are people that were easily understanding to me.
okay,
that was the most important aspect for what determined my relationship with people. If people had a hard time understanding me and what I was explaining and my heart and who I am as a human being, or just who I am as a person and my vision of life and how I pursued life, that meant we're not going to go that deep.
Yeah.
But if it was easy to kind of hit it off and me not being able to over explain what I'm saying, that meant we're going to go far in life. We're going to go deeper in life. So most of the closest friends that I have are based off people that understand me easily. So
yeah, that's good. Well, we can keep going for days. I just really, that part I remember being like, okay, wait, I want to hear this, because there's something to learn there for all of us, because there is so many tables that we come to with our own personal stories, and it's not similar. And I've been in situations where I've heard, like, people speak kind of from a privileged place, and I remember just burning up and being like, well, you're so privileged. But then, and the Lord literally being like, I'm not going to punish them because they didn't have experience you had. Your experience created who you are and the relationship that you have with me. And they have their own struggles and their own, and you're upset because I've protected them. You're upset because they didn't experience what you experienced. Like, you know what I mean? So I think all of that to say, it helps us as Christians kind of sit at a table and share and grow together.
And what I'll say is how I grew and matured in that process of interacting with people and also sharing my story, in a sense, became more of leaving an impact in people. With my story, I don't ever want to shame you with the struggles that you're having, but find some sort of encouragement. If I had it that bad and I was able to find God in that process and found life, joy, and sense of meaning in life, then that could be encouraging to you. So at any point, if you're going through any struggle in life, don't feel shame. But if you hear my story and you feel some sort of encouragement, then that's the most successful thing I've done.
The same God that helped you, the same God, what is it in the Bible? And they're like, whatever your God has done, he can do it for me, kind of thing. Absolutely.
No matter what situation.
Yeah.
And that's the best part of it.
Yeah. Okay. We have to wrap up soon, because we can definitely do another episode. I think. And there's so much, but I think what I would love to like end on, and what I want to understand, and you've been so good at like whatever small statement I give you, you're understanding me. I tried. If you, again, going back to God, and if there's an attribute of God, or if there's a truth, a biblical truth that you feel like, oh, when I look back at my life, this is what I think I've understood. This is what I've learned about God. Either his attribute, his truth, something about him that you think, this equals Shisha's life. I know you probably have like 35, but
I know. I mean, this, it's kind of getting real because it makes me even feel emotional. But I think the biggest thing for me is the biggest attribute God has done for me from the beginning when I was a little kid and I've experienced him is that he gave me the meaning of life. And in every thing that I did, in every relationship I've developed with people, it gave it more meaning because he is the meaning of life. We live to pursue him, to find him, to live with him. So if that understanding of life is acquired at any point of our life, then we have lived life successfully.
Yeah.
So
everything makes sense that way.
And I can think so many countless moments in my life that could have easily made me spiral away and out of life. But being a whole person, a whole being, mentally unaffected, mentally strong, physically capable, but above all, joyful and secure is the biggest attribute of God in my life. And I can give you countless of things where I've almost lost my life. I've almost lost everything in my life. I've almost lost everyone in my life. But through it all, I never felt that I was losing my life. I always felt joyful. I always felt secure, and I always found the meaning of life. For me, that's the biggest attribute of God and what sets the tone and how I live my life.
Biggest truth, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Shish, you have an incredible story. I haven't really learned from it.
An
There's so many
incredible
things.
God.
Amen.
That's what we have.
Amen. That's true. That's so true. That's so true. I think, I mean, even being friends, I didn't know half of these details, so I'm appreciative of that you shared it with me. But I don't know. I just think that there's a lot that God is still doing with you, and there's definitely a depth and a truth and a seriousness that you. Joyful, but still seriousness that you live your life from.
Yeah.
Very purposeful, very intentional, whether it's intentionally for your own life and taking each moment very seriously, or whether and being present, or even the way that you deal with others. I think that's remarkable. And I don't think that's just coincidence. I think the Lord has definitely put that in you. And I think it's incredible, and it's very contagious for the rest of us.
Yeah. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Even though I don't believe in luck.
Yeah.
I'm blessed enough to experience God at such a young age because, yes, there is a joy to having a testimony. Oh man, the depth got me out of. But there's a special joy that you can find where I found God at a young age, and I thank God I didn't have to go through anything dramatic for me to have to deal with. So I am lucky and blessed, and I'm not speaking down to people that went through the ups and downs in life and then found God, but I think there's a special thing to finding God at a young age and growing with Him. I thank God for that.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Shish, so much for being here.
I'm
you
honored.
are truly great
It's an
company,
honor.
and the story's been wonderful to hear, so I appreciate you.
I'm glad.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.